The bridal suite buzzed with excitement, the air thick with the scent of peonies and the light perfume of hairspray. Ava Collins sat before the vanity, her reflection glowing with nervous anticipation. Her bridesmaids flitted around her, adjusting their dresses, snapping last-minute photos, and perfecting the tiny details that made a wedding day feel magical. The soft hum of music played in the background, laughter filled the space, and for a moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Jessica, her maid of honor, leaned over with a teasing smile. "Are you ready for this? Last chance to run." Ava let out a breathless laugh. "Not a chance. I've been waiting for this moment my entire life." She turned her gaze toward the closet, where her dream dress hung, a breathtaking vision of lace and satin, carefully designed and tailored over the past 6 months. It was perfect. Everything about this day was perfect. Until the smoke started. Ava's heart skipped as a thick, black plume curled from the edges of the closet door. The laughter around her faded. Mia, one of her bridesmaids, wrinkled her nose. "Do you smell that?" Before anyone could react, the door burst open, and flames licked hungrily at the fabric. Ava's body moved before her mind could catch up. She leapt to her feet, eyes wide as her bridesmaids gasped, frozen in shock. The elegant ivory satin of her wedding gown was melting, blackening, burning right before her eyes. And standing in front of it, a silver lighter still clutched between manicured fingers, was Eleanor Sinclair, Ava's soon-to-be mother-in-law. Eleanor tilted her chin slightly, her expression the picture of satisfaction. "Now you can't marry my son." The flames crackled, filling the room with the acrid scent of scorched fabric. For a long, stunned moment, no one moved. Ava's pulse roared in her ears. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides. Jessica was the first to break the silence. "Are you," she choked, voice trembling, "are you out of your damn mind?" Eleanor barely spared her a glance, her focus trained on Ava, a smirk dancing at the corners of her lips. Ava's voice came out steady, though her entire body was rigid with shock and fury. "You burned my wedding dress." Eleanor gave a light, airy shrug. "I did." Her tone was almost amused, as if she had done something mildly inconvenient instead of setting fire to the most important dress of Ava's life. Jessica took a furious step forward. "You." Ava lifted a hand, stopping her. She wouldn't give Eleanor the satisfaction of watching her break. Instead, she squared her shoulders. "Why?" Eleanor sighed dramatically, shaking her head as if Ava were a child who simply didn't understand the world. "Liam deserves better than this," she said coolly. "He deserves someone who understands our world, our status, not some outsider." Jessica scoffed, eyes flashing with rage. "Oh, so arson is a rich people's hobby now." Eleanor ignored her, her attention solely on Ava, waiting for her to crumble, to fall apart, to break down in despair over the ruins of her gown. Ava's heart pounded, but she didn't cry. She didn't yell. Instead, she reached for her phone. With a single swipe, she turned the screen toward Eleanor, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. Eleanor's smirk faltered. "What are you doing?" Ava's lips curled slightly. "Showing you something." The screen displayed a live video feed, a direct stream from the ceremony space where the guests were already seated, waiting for the wedding to begin. More importantly, on the massive projection screen at the altar, this very room was being broadcast in real time. And every single person watching had just seen Eleanor light Ava's dress on fire. A beat of silence passed. Then, Eleanor's face was drained of color. Her gaze flickered to the screen, where the comment section was flooding with messages. "Is that Liam's mother? WTF, she just burned the dress. Oh my god. The bride is handling this like a queen." Ava watched as realization dawned in Eleanor's eyes. She hadn't just sabotaged the wedding. She had exposed herself, to the guests, to the Sinclair family, and most importantly, to Liam. The unmistakable sound of footsteps pounding up the hall echoed through the bridal suite. Jessica glanced at the screen, then gasped. Liam saw. The camera feed had shifted. The once patient groom was no longer standing at the altar. He was sprinting down the aisle, his father right behind him, his best man rushing after them. Ava's phone buzzed in her hand. "Liam, I'm coming to you now." The door burst open, and there he was, his tux slightly undone, his breath labored, his expression raw with fury. His eyes darted to the charred dress, to Ava, then to his mother standing smugly beside the destruction. His voice came out dangerously quiet. Tell me I didn't just watch my mother destroy your wedding dress because she thinks you're not good enough for me. Eleanor lifted her chin, but for the first time, there was a flicker of uncertainty behind her carefully crafted exterior. Sweetheart, she started, her voice dripping with forced calm. This is for your own good. Liam's entire body tensed, his hands curling into fists. For my own good, he repeated, his voice a razor's edge. You think humiliating Ava, destroying her dress, ruining our day, was for my own good? Eleanor took a step toward him, still trying to salvage control. You don't understand. I was only— Stop. Liam cut her off sharply. Just stop. His father, Richard, stepped beside him, his face unreadable, but his presence commanding. He had seen it all, and the weight of his disappointment hung heavy in the air. Eleanor, he said, his tone calm, yet dangerously cold. You've gone too far. Ava exhaled slowly, shifting her gaze between them. She felt Liam's fingers brush against hers. Warm, steady. A silent promise that nothing had changed. And Eleanor? She had just lost everything she had tried to protect. Liam stood in the doorway, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts, his chest rising and falling as he took in the chaos in front of him. His mother. The burned remnants of Ava's wedding dress. The lingering smoke curling in the air. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. He had always known his mother was controlling, manipulative, ruthless. But this was pure malice. His voice came out low and lethal, cutting through the stunned silence of the room. Tell me I didn't just watch my mother burn Ava's dress because she thinks she's not good enough for me. Eleanor took a slow, deliberate step forward, her usual poise barely faltering. Sweetheart, she said, her voice syrupy with forced calm. You don't understand. Liam's jaw tightened. Oh, I understand perfectly. Eleanor let out a light, breathy laugh, like this was nothing more than a minor misunderstanding. I was only trying to protect you. Ava stiffened beside him, and Liam felt his anger boil over. From what, Mom? He snapped, his voice sharp and furious. From the woman I love? The woman I chose. Eleanor crossed her arms. From making a mistake, she said simply. Liam let out a disbelieving scoff, running a hand through his hair. A mistake? His voice was rising now, unable to contain the outrage, the sheer disbelief at what she had done. You think humiliating Ava, destroying her dress, ruining our wedding, was for my own good? Eleanor's expression flickered, like she had expected anger, but not this level of cold fury. Liam, she tried again, softer now, attempting to regain control. Richard Sinclair stepped into the room then, his presence heavy and unyielding. He wasn't a man prone to outbursts, but the look on his face spoke volumes. Liam turned toward him, searching his father's expression. You saw that, right? He asked, voice tight. Richard gave a single, stiff nod. His gaze flickered to Eleanor, unreadable, but sharp enough to cut glass. Eleanor lifted her chin, the tension in her posture barely concealed. Oh, don't look at me like that, Richard, she said coolly. This was necessary. Richard's lips pressed into a thin line. Necessary? His voice was quiet but dangerous, carrying the weight of a man who had finally had enough. Eleanor scoffed. You'll thank me later. Ava took a step forward then, her presence commanding despite the disaster surrounding her. No, she said, her voice measured, unshaken. He won't. Liam turned toward her, his fury softening into something else entirely, admiration. Ava wasn't crying. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't even shaken. She was strong, unbothered, in control. And as she moved past the burnt remains of her dress, past the lingering smoke, she did something Eleanor never expected. She reached for her phone and adjusted the camera on the laptop, making sure the guests watching from the live stream could see her clearly. To everyone waiting, she said smoothly, as if this was just another wedding announcement and not a public disaster. Thank you for your patience. There's been a slight, unexpected development. A slight chuckle rippled through the guests watching, and Eleanor's face twisted in horror. Ava continued, unwavering. But make no mistake, this wedding is still happening. A loud cheer erupted from the laptop speakers. Liam let out a sharp breath, his chest swelling with pride. Eleanor's mouth dropped open, her eyes darting between Ava and the screen. "You can't be serious," she said, almost staggering backward. "You don't even have a dress." Ava smiled, and for the first time since this disaster unfolded, Eleanor looked truly terrified. "Watch me," Ava said. Jessica, quick as ever, was already dialing. "I'm calling Eliza. If anyone has a wedding dress on standby, it's her." Liam turned toward Richard, silent agreement passing between them. Richard pulled out his phone. "I'll have my driver pick it up." Eleanor was losing, and she knew it. Her perfect plan to derail the wedding, to reduce Ava to a weeping mess, to have Liam walk away in frustration. It had failed, and now she was powerless to stop what was coming next. Jessica's fingers flew over her phone screen as she paced the bridal suite. "Come on, pick up," she muttered under her breath. Ava stood still, breathing deeply, steadying herself despite the chaos still lingering in the air. Her wedding dress, the one she had spent months perfecting, was nothing more than ashes now. But she refused to let that define this moment. The call connected. "Eliza!" Jessica practically shouted into the phone. "We have a crisis. Do you have a wedding dress available? Like, right now?" Ava could hear the muffled confusion on the other end.
"What? Why?"
"What's happening?" Jessica huffed. Eleanor happened. Silence. Then Eliza's sharp intake of breath.
Oh.
"Eliza." Ava finally spoke, her voice calm but urgent. "I need a dress. I don't care if it's not what I originally picked. I just need to get married today." Eliza didn't hesitate. "I have 3 options. One's a lace sheath, simple but elegant. The second is a full-skirted satin ball gown. The first one," Ava said immediately. She didn't need a princess gown or some extravagant look. She needed something strong, something classic, something here. Jessica spun toward Liam's father, who had been watching the chaos unfold with quiet precision. "Richard, can you?" He was already on his phone. "My driver is on his way." Ava nodded her thanks, a silent understanding passing between them. Richard had never interfered much in Eleanor's actions, always taking the path of least resistance. But today, that had changed. As soon as the call ended, the bridal suite became a war room. The venue coordinator, Rachel, brought in the seamstress, who rolled up her sleeves the moment she heard what happened. "We'll make it work," she assured Ava, already setting up her sewing kit. "Just get me the dress, and I'll make sure it's perfect." Jessica looked at Ava, shaking her head in amazement. "I don't know how you're this calm." Ava exhaled slowly. "Because this isn't about a dress," she said. "This is about Liam and me, and nothing is stopping us." Meanwhile, outside the bridal suite, the entire internet was catching wind of what had just happened. Guests were posting updates, clips from the live stream, and even reaction videos. One of Ava's cousins tweeted, "The groom's mother burned the bride's dress, and the wedding is still happening. This woman is unstoppable. Hashtag you can't burn love." The replies flooded in. "I don't even know her, but I stan this bride. If I don't get updates on this wedding every 5 minutes, I'm going to lose my mind. Ava Collins is my new role model." The story was spreading like wildfire, and the more it spread, the weaker Eleanor's influence became. This wasn't just about high society or power struggles anymore. This was about a woman refusing to let anyone take her moment away from her. Down at the ceremony space, Liam stood at the altar, running a hand through his hair. The guests were still buzzing, whispers rippling through the crowd. Liam's best man nudged him. "You good?" Liam looked toward the entrance, his heart steadying. "Yeah," he said. "Because she's coming." The live stream camera was still rolling when Liam took a step forward and picked up the microphone. He turned toward the guests, toward the hundreds of people watching online, and spoke. "I know today didn't go how we planned," he said, his voice strong. "But weddings aren't about plans. They're not about perfect dresses or elaborate ceremonies. They're about one thing." He glanced toward the bridal suite, his expression softening. "Choosing someone. Every single day. No matter what happens. No matter who tries to stand in the way." The crowd fell silent, hanging on to his words. "Today, I choose Ava," he said, without hesitation. "I will always choose Ava." The cheers erupted instantly. The internet? It exploded. "The bar for men has been raised. If a man doesn't love me like Liam loves Ava, I don't want him. This is the realest wedding I've ever seen." Inside the bridal suite, Ava felt tears prick the corners of her eyes as she listened. Jessica grinned. I think you found a good one. Ava laughed, her heart swelling. Yeah, she whispered. I did. And then, the dress arrived. Richard's driver stepped inside, garment bag in hand, moving quickly to the seamstress. Here, he said, breathless. Eliza sent her best. Ava's bridesmaids gathered around as they unveiled the gown. The delicate ivory lace caught the light, the silhouette sleek and elegant. It wasn't what she had originally chosen. It was better. The seamstress got to work, taking in the waist, adjusting the hem, turning it into something custom in a matter of minutes. Ava stepped into the dress, letting Jessica zip up the back. As she turned to the mirror, the reflection staring back at her was not a woman defeated. It was a woman who had survived the fire and came out stronger. Jessica adjusted the final pin in Ava's veil. You ready? Ava smiled. More than ever. The soft melody of the wedding march began, but instead of the usual hushed anticipation, the ceremony space erupted in applause. Ava stepped into the aisle, her fingers gently grazing the delicate lace of her new gown, her eyes locked on Liam standing at the altar. She had expected a few murmurs, maybe some whispers of sympathy, but this was an ovation. The guests rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some even whistling as she took her first step forward. The entire atmosphere had shifted. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a moment of triumph. Even the staff watching from the sidelines exchanged glances, knowing they were witnessing something unforgettable. Liam stood at the end of the aisle, his chest rising and falling with deep emotion, his eyes never leaving hers. Ava's heart pounded in her chest, but it wasn't nerves. It was power, strength. She wasn't walking toward Liam as a bride whose day had been ruined. She was walking toward him as a woman who refused to let anyone break her. And from the far side of the ceremony space, Eleanor Sinclair sat stiffly, watching in absolute horror. This was not the scene she had imagined. Ava was supposed to be humiliated, devastated, maybe even absent altogether. Instead, she was radiant, her confidence only heightened by the storm she had walked through. Richard Sinclair stood a few feet away from Eleanor, arms crossed, a subtle smirk playing at his lips as he watched his wife's plan crumble before her eyes. He leaned slightly toward her, speaking just loud enough for her to hear. I think you underestimated her. Eleanor's jaw tightened, her nails digging into the fabric of her dress. This is a disgrace. Richard chuckled under his breath. No, Eleanor. This is what happens when you push too far. At the altar, Liam took a steadying breath as Ava reached him, slipping her hand into his. Are you okay? He murmured softly, his fingers tightening around hers. Ava's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. Never better. The officiant, who had likely never seen a wedding quite like this before, gave a knowing smile before continuing. We are gathered here today to celebrate a love that has already faced challenges and has proven itself stronger than any obstacle. Liam exhaled slowly, his gaze locked on Ava, filled with something deep and unshakable. Then came the vows. Liam took a step closer, his voice steady but thick with emotion. Ava, from the moment I met you, I knew you were different. You challenge me, you inspire me, you make me better. And today, after everything, I know this more than ever. Nothing will ever stand between us. He paused, his jaw tightening slightly before adding, I promise to stand by you, against anyone who tries to come between us. A ripple of emotion swept through the guests. Ava felt her breath catch. Liam wasn't just making a vow to her, he was making a statement to everyone in the room. To his mother. Eleanor's lips parted slightly, her face paling. There was no mistaking the meaning behind his words. Ava swallowed hard, steadying herself before speaking. Liam, she said, her voice unwavering, I knew today wouldn't be perfect. Life never is. But through every twist, every challenge, one thing has always been certain. You and me. No matter what happens, no matter who tries to stand in our way, I will always choose you. Liam's breath hitched, and for a moment, it felt like the entire world had faded away. The officiant smiled warmly. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Liam, you may now kiss the bride. Liam didn't hesitate. He pulled Ava into him and kissed her deeply, a kiss that spoke of resilience, of love, of a bond no one could break. The guests cheered so loudly, it nearly drowned out the music. Even online, The live stream was flooded with reaction. She won. She really won. This is the greatest wedding of all time. Eleanor really thought she could stop this? LOL. But just when the celebration had reached its peak, Eleanor made her final mistake. She rose from her seat, her voice sharp and furious. "This wedding is a disgrace," she spat. "You all sit here and pretend like this is normal? This," she gestured toward Ava, her expression twisting with anger, "is what's best for my son." The guests stilled, their excitement morphing into uncomfortable silence. Liam's smile disappeared instantly. Ava didn't flinch, but her fingers tightened around Liam's hand. Richard Sinclair stepped forward, his presence commanding and unyielding. "Eleanor," he said, his voice dangerously calm, "sit
down."
Eleanor turned toward him, her face contorted with disbelief. "Richard, you can't possibly be okay with this." Richard sighed, adjusting his cufflinks like he was handling a minor inconvenience rather than his wife's public meltdown. And then he delivered the final blow. "The only mistake made today," he said, "was me putting up with you for as long as I have." A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Eleanor staggered slightly, like the words had physically struck her. Richard turned toward security, his expression unreadable. "Escort her out." Eleanor froze. "You can't be serious," she hissed. Richard didn't waver. "Eleanor, you burned your bridges today. Now you get to live with the consequences." Security stepped forward, waiting for her to move. Eleanor looked around, realizing no one was coming to her defense. Not her husband, not her son, not a single person in attendance. With one last glare toward Ava, she lifted her chin and stormed out. The doors slammed shut behind her. And just like that, Eleanor Sinclair was gone. The tension broke instantly, replaced by another wave of cheers and laughter. Ava turned to Liam, shaking her head. "Did your dad just—" Liam let out a breathless laugh, his eyes shining with something close to relief. "Yeah," he said. "He did." Richard, now standing beside them, gave Ava a small, approving nod. "You chose well," he said simply before stepping back into the crowd. The music swelled again, and as Ava and Liam walked down the aisle hand in hand, she couldn't help but think. Eleanor tried to stop this wedding, but all she had done was make it legendary. By the time the wedding reception had ended, Eleanor Sinclair was already a ghost. Her absence at the after-party wasn't just noticed, it was celebrated. The moment security escorted her out of the ceremony, it was as if she had ceased to exist in the eyes of the elite social circles she had once ruled. The fallout was immediate and merciless. The woman who had spent decades meticulously curating her place among the wealthy and powerful was now a pariah. Her so-called friends? They stopped returning her calls. The exclusive country club she once dictated? They quietly revoked her membership. The charity board she chaired? She was suddenly no longer needed. No one wanted to be associated with the mother-in-law who burned her son's bride's dress and got publicly humiliated at the wedding. Her grand plan to tear Ava down had backfired spectacularly, because while Ava had walked away stronger, celebrated, admired, Eleanor had lost everything. And the final nail in the coffin? Richard filed for divorce the very next day. Liam had expected his father to be slow, hesitant, maybe even reluctant, but Richard wasted no time. "She's controlled everything for too long," Richard told Liam over coffee the morning after the wedding. "I let it happen because it was easier. But yesterday? Yesterday was the moment I realized I don't respect her anymore. And if you don't respect someone, what's left?" Liam had nothing to say to that. His father had always been distant, quiet, but this was the first time Liam saw him as a man making a real choice, one that didn't involve Eleanor pulling the strings. And while Eleanor's world crumbled, Ava's was expanding. Her name had already been circulating on social media from the wedding's viral moment, but within a week, something unexpected happened. News outlets picked up the story. At first, it was just a sensational wedding disaster headline. "Bride's dress burned by mother-in-law, refuses to let it ruin her wedding." But then, the conversation shifted. People weren't just talking about Eleanor's cruelty, they were talking about Ava's strength. The way she had refused to let someone else dictate her happiness. The way she had stood tall, unshaken, and finished what she started. Suddenly, the business world took notice. Ava's branding agency, which had been small but growing, exploded with new opportunities. Companies reached out, saying they wanted to work with someone who could handle pressure and adversity with grace. Women's leadership conferences sent invitations for her to speak on resilience and independence. Liam had always known Ava was exceptional. Now, the world was starting to see it too. And then, one final loose end remained. One evening, as Ava sat in her office reviewing yet another media request, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. But she didn't need to check the contact. She knew exactly who it was. "You ruined my family." Ava stared at the message for a long moment, then exhaled slowly, shaking her head. Eleanor still didn't get it. She had ruined herself. Without hesitation, Ava tapped the screen once.
Blocked.
Then, she set her phone down and smiled. Eleanor was nothing more than a footnote now. And Ava? She was just getting started. 6 months had passed since the wedding, and Ava's life had never been better. What had started as a nightmare scenario had somehow transformed into her greatest success. Her business, which had been steadily growing, skyrocketed after the wedding went viral. The branding agency she had worked so hard to build became one of the most sought after in the industry. Clients weren't just drawn to her expertise anymore. They were drawn to her story. The woman who had handled a public disaster with grace, refused to be broken, and walked through fire, literally, without flinching.
And now,
she stood on stage at a prestigious business conference, a microphone in her hand, as hundreds of aspiring entrepreneurs and industry leaders listened to her speak about handling crises and turning adversity into power. A massive screen behind her displayed an image from the wedding, her walking down the aisle in her replacement dress, head high, unshaken. She smiled, scanning the room. "People ask me all the time if I wish that day had gone differently," she said, her voice steady, confident. "If I wish my wedding had been exactly how I planned it, without the chaos, without the fire." The audience leaned in, hanging on to her words. She paused, then shook her head. "My answer is no," she said. "Because that moment, the moment when I refused to let someone else define my happiness, was more important than the perfect dress, the perfect ceremony, the perfect wedding." A wave of applause rippled through the crowd. She continued. "We spend so much time trying to control everything, to make sure things go exactly how we imagine. But the truth is, life will always throw something unexpected at you." She glanced at the image of herself on the screen. "When that happens, you have 2 choices," she said. "Fall apart, or adapt." Another round of applause. She smiled, stepping back from the podium, the power of the moment settling deep into her bones. She had come so far. But while Ava was thriving, Eleanor Sinclair was falling apart. The woman who had once held social power, wealth, and status had become a cautionary tale. Her divorce from Richard had been quick and merciless. She had assumed she would walk away with millions, only to find out Richard had protected his assets far better than she ever realized. Instead of a luxurious settlement, she got a modest payout, and nothing more. Her social circle?
Gone.
The women she had once controlled, manipulated, and looked down on? They had distanced themselves immediately. Without money, without influence, without anyone to manipulate, Eleanor Sinclair had nothing. She tried, of course, to reconcile with Liam. A few months after the wedding, she sent him an email. "Liam, I know we've had our differences, but I was only trying to protect you. Let's put the past behind us. I'm still your mother. Let's talk." Liam read the message twice. Then, he deleted it.
He didn't respond.
He didn't engage. Eleanor had spent years playing games, pulling strings, controlling everyone around her. But Liam was done playing. Meanwhile, Ava was building something real. She sat in her office one evening, looking over expansion plans for her business. Her agency had been so successful that she was opening multiple locations, something she had dreamed about for years. Liam walked in, leaning against the doorframe, watching her with quiet admiration. "You know," he said, smirking, "I think you might actually be unstoppable." Ava laughed, setting down her pen. "I like to think so," she teased. Liam crossed the room, wrapping his arms around her waist, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "No," he said softly. "I know so." Ava leaned into him, closing her eyes for a moment. She thought about everything that had happened. The fire, the chaos, the humiliation Eleanor had tried to orchestrate. And yet, none of it mattered anymore. Because Eleanor didn't win. She never had control. She never had the power to break Ava, to destroy her happiness, to stop her from getting everything she had ever wanted. Ava exhaled, a deep, full breath of peace. Because the truth was, she didn't feel anger anymore. She didn't need revenge. She had something better. A beautiful life, a thriving business, a husband who adored her. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting better.